All right, so here for classifying triangles, at the beginning it was asking us to classify based on the sides. And so we had three different types of angles. We had our scalene triangles, which have all sides where none of them are the same, okay? So all three sides are different. We have our isosceles triangle, which is where there's two sides that are congruent or the same. And then we had our equilateral, where all three sides and angles are the same. Okay, so here if we look at the properties of this triangle, we could see that we have two sides that are the same. They're congruent. The reason we know that they're congruent is because they have these tallies. Remember the tallies, we had talked about them in units prior. Whenever they have the same number of tallies, it tells us they're congruent. So here, these two are going to be congruent. What I do want you guys to note is that once we know that this is going to be an isosceles triangle, so that would be our answer here, isosceles. Okay. The angles that are directly across from the side corresponds to that angle. So here, if we're looking at this side here, the angle that is directly across is the one that corresponds. So that means that this angle here is also going to be congruent to this angle here. The reason for that is because that angle is directly across from that side, okay? So that might be confusing, but it's going to help us later in our other one. So once again, once you know which sides are congruent, go directly across and you will know that those angles are also congruent. Here it tells us, but most of the other ones won't tell us. Okay. Here for number 2, it doesn't give us any tallies, and therefore because it doesn't give us any information about the sides, we're automatically going to know that this is going to be a scalene. Okay, and so once again, scalene just means it's a triangle where none of the sides are the same. So it has all different lengths. All right, so here, number 3, once again, if we're looking at the sides here, so we have one tally, we have one tally, and we have one tally. So meaning that all three sides are going to be congruent, and so we know that if all three sides are congruent, this is what we call an equilateral. Okay, and so once again, the angle that is directly across from the side is going to be its corresponding angle. So this one here directly across, that means this angle corresponds to that side. Okay, here, if we're looking at the bottom and we go directly across, this angle corresponds with this side. And then here, same thing, if we go directly across, this angle is going to correspond with it. Okay, so once again, here, all three of the angles are going to be congruent. And so I had a question for you guys, and you can unmute yourself if you know the answer. So if I have three angles that are congruent, that means they're the same, and I know that for every single triangle, all three of the angles have to add up to 180 degrees. What is going to be the measure of these angles if all three of them have to add up to 180 degrees and they're all the same? Can anyone unmute themselves and tell me the answer there?
60.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, so exactly. And Ashley, how did you come up with 60?
180 divided by 3.
Perfect. We have three angles, and they all have to add up to the 180. And so, yeah, if we do 180 divided by the 3, it is going to give us the 60 degrees. Perfect. Thank you, Ashley. All right. Here, all that's given to us on number 4 is this angle, right? So this angle, we know it's a right angle, right? So we know that it's 90 degrees. So we could say that this is a right angle, but if you look at the directions of, on here, it said classify each angle by its sides. Well, we don't know anything about its sides. So this one would also be a scalene angle. Okay, and then I'll let you guys do 5 and 6 on your own. Number 7 here was asking us to find the value of x. And so this, once again, is going to be where the properties are important. So can someone unmute themselves and tell me what kind of angle is number 7? Is it scalene? Is it isosceles? Or is it equilateral? Anyone?
Isosceles.
Perfect. Yes, it's an isosceles triangle. So, because we know it's an isosceles triangle, right? Because it has two sides that are congruent, right? So these two sides here are congruent. So now what we know, we're going to use that information, and so now we're going to find the angles, right? So remember, the angles are directly across. So that means that this angle corresponds with this side. And so then if we go directly across from this side, that also means that this angle has to correspond with that one. So if you guys see here, the x and the 70 are congruent angles. And so here, in order for us to find that, we know that x is going to equal 70 degrees because these two angles are congruent. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Does anyone have questions as to how I came up with x is equal to 70? Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask me any questions now. Any questions?
How did you get 70?
The 70? Okay. So Brianna here, the 70 was already given to us. Let me see. The 70 was given to us here. Okay, and so I'm going to recreate the triangle here. Okay, so if it doesn't matter if the angles are if the sides are congruent or not. I always know that the angle that corresponds with that red side is going to be this angle here. The reason for that, the corresponding angles are always going to be directly across from the side. Okay, so then if I'm looking at this side here, I know that the angle that's going to correspond to it is this one here. Okay, and once again, it's because it's directly across from it. Okay, and then lastly, if I have this bottom side, I know that the angle that corresponds with that side is going to be this angle up here. And once again, it's because the angle is directly across from the side. Okay, does that make sense there, Brianna?
Yeah.
Okay, so now knowing that the angle directly across from the side is going to be congruent, okay, now we're going to use that information on the triangle that we have. We have an isosceles triangle, meaning that these two sides with the red tally tells us that they're congruent. Okay, so here I'm going to find the angles that correspond to those two sides. So if I go directly across, I'm going to do it over here. Let me erase this red. Okay, so if I'm looking at this top angle here, I know that if I go directly across, that's going to correspond to the 70 degrees. Okay, now I have another side which is also congruent to that same side. That means they're the same. Okay, so if I go across, that angle is also going to be the same as the other angle down here. So x has to equal 70 because the two sides are congruent. That means the two angles are also going to be congruent. Did that explain it a little bit better, Brianna?
Yeah, it did.
Okay. Any other questions on this problem, guys? Because this is the important stuff when it comes to our special triangles. So our isosceles, our equilateral triangles are going to have a lot of properties like that. So we have to understand how to identify the angles based on the sides. Any other questions on number 7? All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to number 8 then. All right, so here we're given, once again, two sides that are congruent. And so here, what would this triangle be? If you can unmute yourself and tell me. So is it an isosceles triangle? Is it an equilateral triangle? Or is it a scalene triangle? Desiree, do you have a guess? You can unmute yourself and tell me. Anyone? Unmute themselves. Tell me, what kind of angle is this?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Romario. What was that? Anyone? What kind of angle is this? Thank you, James. Yes, this is also an isosceles triangle. Okay, so once again, we know that the two sides are going to be congruent. And so what we care about now is going to be the side, or the angles that correspond to them. So here, if I go directly across, I know that x is going to be congruent to the angle that's directly across from here. We don't know anything about that angle, but because I know that this is x, this also has to be x. Okay, and so in order for me to be able to solve for x here, I'm just going to go ahead and use the triangle sum theorem to solve for x, right? Because I know that x plus 88 is going to equal the 180. Okay, so combine like terms, I'm going to get 2 x's there, plus the 88, that's going to give me the 180. Subtract the 88 from both sides to do the inverse operation. So I get 2x is equal to 92. Divide by 2. And here x is going to give me 46. And so that would be my final answer there. Questions on how I did that? Why the top angle is the same as that bottom angle? And so once again, I'm simply using the properties of isosceles triangles. I have two sides that are congruent, therefore the opposite angles are also going to be congruent to them. All right, guys, I'm looking at the time. It's already 11:35, and so I just want to make sure that I honor your guys' lunch. Okay, let me see. So do I have any other questions? You guys can go ahead and unmute yourselves. Do you have any other questions for me that you would like to ask on this worksheet while I'm on it? If not, I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys there. Okay, so I'm going to go through. Christian, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Which one?
Where did you get the angles for 7 through 12?
For 7 through 12?
Yeah.
Where did I get the angles? So remember, we created the angles. So here it only told us information about the sides. And so here, knowing that this is an isosceles triangle, because there's two sides that are congruent, I'm also going to have two angles that are congruent. The congruent angles are going to be the angles that are directly across. So that's what I was showing you here with the arrows. The ones that are directly across from the two sides that are congruent are also going to be congruent. So that's why I know that x is equal to 70. Does that make sense, Christian?
Wait. I mean the triangles.
Where did I get the triangles from?
Yeah.
I got the triangles from the worksheet.
So 7 through 12 is 1 through 6.
There's 12 problems on each worksheet. So this is the classifying triangles worksheet.
We can't see the triangles on Google Classroom.
You can't see them in the so excuse me. I took down the PDF because I put up the Google form. You guys can't open the Google form?
We can, but we can't see like the angles or like the measurements. Does that make sense?
You can't see the question here, like this.
Yeah, we can't see the question.
Okay, let me go ahead and upload the other one then so that you guys can see those. So I do apologize. You can see 1 through 6 though?
Yeah.
Huh, that's weird. Okay, so I'll go ahead and make sure that I reload that one up for you guys. And then I'll send an email to your Remind app so to make sure that you guys can see it. Okay. Let me make sure I have you guys written down really quick before you guys sign off. Let me grab a Post-it. All right. So Ashley, do you have any other questions for me that I can answer for you?
No, that's it.
Okay, you can go ahead and sign off, Ashley. Thank you. Brianna, do you have any other questions for me that I can answer for you now?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and sign off. Christian, besides not being able to see them, can you, do you have any other questions for me?
No.
Okay, you can go ahead and sign off. Desiree, do you have any other questions for me? Desiree? Haley, do you have any other questions for me that I can answer for you before you sign off?
No.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and sign off. James, do you have any questions for me before you sign off?
No.
All right, you can go ahead and sign off. Jasmine, you were the last one to log in. Can you give me your last name, please?
Cavania?
And your 5th period?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any other questions for me, Jasmine?
No.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and sign off. Jonathan, do you have any other questions for me?
No.
Okay, you can go ahead and sign off, Jonathan. Melanie, do you have any questions for me?
No.
And then Melanie, what period are you?
5th.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and sign off as well. Natalie, do you have any questions for me?
No, thank you.
Okay, have a great day. Go ahead and sign off. Let me see. Rafael, do you have any questions for me?
No.
All right, you can go ahead and sign off as well, sir. Romario, do you have any other questions for me?
No.
All right, sir, you can go ahead and sign off as well. Sophia, do you have any other questions for me?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right, go ahead and sign off. Have a good day. Valeria, thank you. Do you have any questions for me?